Have you ever tried to learn a new language and just felt entirely paralyzed by the sheer volume of information? Usually, a traditional classroom forces you to memorize isolated single words. Then you have to cross-reference every single one of those words against massive, complicated grammar rule books to figure out how they fit together. When you actually try to speak to someone, trying to piece together a sentence word by word like that feels painfully slow. You end up sounding and feeling a bit robotic as you search your memory for the right conjugation. The traditional method of learning a language fails because it fights against how the human brain is biologically wired to process information. But what if you could bypass those raw individual materials entirely? Imagine building with pre-assembled pieces instead. Linguists call these pre-assembled pieces chunks. Chunks are ready-made multi-word phrases that native speakers use as single units of meaning. If the traditional single-word approach is like staring at a pile of loose, disconnected bricks, the chunk approach is like having a pre-built window frame or a solid door, ready to be installed immediately. Real fluency isn't about perfectly calculating how every individual word connects. It is about knowing how to snap these pre-built structural phrases together instantly. To understand why chunking is so effective, we have to look at a specific biological limitation called working memory capacity. Working memory capacity is the small amount of information your brain can hold and process at any given moment. Let's test yours right now. Try to remember this sequence of numbers. It's incredibly difficult to retain that random string. Now, look what happens when we organize that exact same data into groups. By restructuring the information into blocks, it becomes instantly memorable. The average human brain can only hold about 7 distinct items in its active memory at once. Grouping data, or chunking it, tricks the brain into holding vastly more information within those same 7 slots. When we apply this cognitive rule to language, the problem with the traditional method becomes obvious. If you try mentally juggling a subject, a verb, a preposition, and an object in real-time conversation, you quickly max out your active memory slots. If you try to process a foreign language word by word, your brain simply runs out of processing power before you can finish the sentence. Language chunks serve as the ultimate hack for this working memory bottleneck. Look at this diagram. Instead of memorizing the words take, a, and shower as 3 distinct units that you have to conjugate and arrange, you learn the phrase as one inseparable entity. Notice how this multi-word phrase now only occupies a single slot in your brain's working memory, freeing up cognitive space. You can immediately adopt high-frequency conversational chunks, like fillers and idioms, to fill the rest of those slots. Utilizing these pre-built chunks bypasses the slow, exhausting grammar processing phase, allowing you to focus your mental energy on the actual communication. Now, you might be wondering, if we only memorize phrases, how do we ever learn the actual rules of grammar? The answer lies in a subconscious process called unpackaging. Unpackaging occurs naturally after you have successfully used a chunk in the real world several times. Think about native-speaking children. They operate their language perfectly to get what they want, long before they know what a verb is. Once your brain is comfortable using a chunk, it automatically begins taking the phrase apart behind the scenes. It discovers the grammar rules hidden inside, without you ever having to study a textbook. A deep understanding of grammar emerges as a natural byproduct of using chunks consistently in the real world. Imagine yourself operating in a state of flow, no longer bogged down by the minutiae of individual words. Fluency is the ability to access a massive, internalized library of chunks, rather than perfectly calculating grammar rules on the fly. To reach that state, you should stop hunting for isolated vocabulary words when you're watching movies or reading books in your target language. Instead, actively listen for ready-made phrases. Collect the exact chunks native speakers use and deploy them whole in your own conversations. When you shift your focus from individual bricks to pre-built sections, the pieces of a new language begin to connect with much more clarity and speed.